Welcome back, Hornets. We are ready for another workbook lesson today. Today we're going to be doing part 4 of lesson 13. Part 4 starts on page 132. So if you don't have out your ready workbook, pause the video, take a minute to get out your materials, and come back when you're ready. Okay, so since this is part 4, the first thing I'm going to do is write the title of my lesson up at the top of the page. And I know that the title of this lesson is Analyzing Rhyme and Repetition. Okay, we know analyzing means that we are breaking something apart to take a close look at it. Rhyme, I know, deals with ending sounds. And there are a few different types of repetition that I know I'm dealing with during this lesson. So I know I have to think about word repetition, which is repeating words or phrases. I have to think about alliteration, which is the repetition of consonant sounds. And I also have to think about assonance, which is the repetition of vowel sounds. So anytime I'm thinking about rhyme or repetition of any sort, I know I have to consider the tone of the text and whether or not it's positive, negative, or neutral. You will also need to think about word choice and whether or not the word choice is strong or weak. And you will also have to think about the author's meaning and what they are trying to help us understand in the text. So, all of these things work together to create unity in a text. All right. So, now that we have appropriately broken down our title and we've thought about a few things, let's look at our directions. So, the directions tell me to read the drama, which quotes John Greenleaf Whittier's Barbara Frecci and Alfred Lord Tennyson's The Charge of the Light Brigade. So use the study buddy and the close reading to guide you. So we know that what we are looking at is a drama. We'll talk about that in a little more in a second. And we know that there are going to be a few quotes from this drama that come from the poem Barbara Frecci and The Charge of the Light Brigade. So, those are two poems. So, we know that there are going to be quotes within this drama that come from those poems. And then we have to also use the study buddy and the close reading to guide us as we read. So, now let's take a minute. Let's talk about this genre drama. So, you have some notes that you have already copied down about drama, but let's take a minute and go back and refresh um about these notes on drama. So we know that drama is a play. So a play is another word for drama. And we know that typically plays take place like in a theater. They could happen on the radio potentially, television. Um, so it's really just a play that you would go and see or listen to if it's on the radio. So drama is driven by dialogue. So, dialogue is a big deal in drama because it helps reveal the information about the plot and the character's traits, attitudes, and motivations. So, a character's words also help the reader understand information about other characters. So, that is very important as well. So, because a play is performed on stage, the dialogue is the main element that moves the plot of the story forward. So, that's one of the main things I want you to know. Um, about a play, any kind of drama, it's going to have dialogue. And we know dialogue is when characters are talking to each other. The other big thing you need to know about drama is that it has stage directions. So stage directions are usually pieces of bracketed information that describe like the scenery and how the characters should move around the stage and how they talk. It may not always be in brackets. Sometimes it'll be in italics. It just kind of depends on the drama, the particular play. All right, so we have to make sure, since we know this is a play, this is drama, we have to make sure we pay attention to our stage directions, and we want to make sure we pay attention to our dialogue. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at this play before you read it. So I know the title of this play is To Honor, and I know honor has something to do with like positive regard or respect. So that kind of maybe gives me a hint as to what the play is going to be about. So I want you to notice that we have 10 separate paragraphs in this play. They're numbered for you, so you don't have to do that. In paragraph 1, I want you to notice that this is written in italics. So these, guys, this will be your stage directions. These are your stage directions. So it says in scene 2, in which 3 students discuss their group project. So we know that they're students and we know they're discussing a group project. So they're probably at school or this has something to do with school. And it tells us that this takes place in scene 2. So this is the part of the play that they are currently in. They're in the second scene. All right, so we know that because this is a play, not only do we have to pay attention to stage directions, which tell us it can tell us information about the characters, the way that they're supposed to act, what they're doing. We have to pay attention to dialogue so we can figure out what the characters are saying. So if you notice all the way through this text, there are names with a colon after. So this is telling you who is talking and when they are talking. So I'm going to go around and I'm going to box in all these names so it's easy for me to figure out who's talking. And if you'll notice, each paragraph is set apart with someone new speaking. Okay? So just from boxing in these, it looks like I have 3 characters that I'm going to be dealing with. It looks like I have Tia, Jerome, and Alicia. So I already know a little bit about my characters, right? I know I've got Tia, Jerome, Alicia, and I know from my stage directions that they are students who are discussing a group project, probably for school. Okay, so before I turn you loose to read, let's look and see what our study buddy is telling us to think about. So let me box in my study buddy. So the study buddy says, so far the poems I've read use sound devices to add meaning to the lines. I wonder how they'll add meaning in this drama. So far we have looked at a lot of different poems and how the poetry uses sound devices, but poetry can also be used in other texts such as drama. So this drama is going to probably use some sound devices to add meaning. So as I read, I'll look for examples and think about how their use can help me understand what happens in the scene. So, we know our examples that it's talking about. We know we're going to look for a few things. So we have rhyme, we have alliteration, assonance, and also word repetition. So these are a few sound devices that you can look for as you read. We've been talking about these all week, so hopefully by now you feel pretty comfortable in identifying these in the text. So, what you are going to do next is you are going to read this play, To Honor by Jana Taylor. And as you read, you're just going to browse around and look for some examples of rhyme, alliteration, assonance, and word repetition. So you're just generally looking for them just right now because you know that they're going to add some meaning to the text. All right, so I'm going to let you read this on your own one time. Whenever you finish reading it on your own, I want you to come back and restart the video because I'm going to explain the first close reading box and tell you what to look for. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video, read to honor for the first time, and think about rhyme, alliteration, and assonance and word repetition. All right, I will see you in just a second. Okay, guys, so I'm assuming that you are back. You have read To Honor, which is about our three students who are discussing um, their group project for school. They are talking about the best way to go about it. They even throw in a few examples of some poetry in their text. So, now that we've read To Honor once, we have thought a little bit about rhyme, alliteration, assonance, word repetition. We're going to come back and do our first close reading box and see what we can find. All right, so the close reading box says to underline examples of alliteration and words that rhyme. What effect do they create? So, if we're thinking about rhyme, we know based on what we've done so far that rhyme is there to create like a musical quality. And it connects ideas. So we know that those are a few things that rhyme does. So you are going to find some examples now of rhyme and alliteration. So I want you to look back in this play and I want to see what examples you can find of alliteration and rhyme. And when you find those, I want you to underline them. You're going to underline them. All right. So go ahead and pause the video. When you are finished, you can come back and we will talk about a few examples. Okay, guys, so I'm assuming you're back. You have underlined your examples of alliteration and rhyme. So now you're ready to compare your answers to what I have. So, the first example of alliteration that I have is in paragraph 3. Well, actually, no, I take it back. In paragraph No, it's in paragraph 3. I have chariots cheering crowds. So, well, chariots cheering and crowds is a different sound, so I'm going to take that off of there. So I have chariots cheering, and then I also have tons of trumpets. So, chariots cheering is an example of repetition. It's alliteration actually. It has the beginning ch sound. So chariots, cheering, that's repeated. And tons of trumpets is also an example of alliteration, the tr sound or the t sound. Tons trumpets at the beginning. So that is one example of alliteration. So we also have, let's see, in paragraph 6, we have this little we have Alicia talking, right? And in paragraph 6, she reads from the poem Barbara Frecci. So in this poem, we have a little bit of alliteration. We have Barbara, bowed, bravest. They all begin with that b sound at the beginning. So even though this is a poem within the drama, we have some examples of alliteration there. Let's see. What else do we have? Okay. I think that's fairly good. on alliteration for now. So let's talk about rhyme. So we are looking for examples of rhyme. So the best place to look for rhyme would be in that poem that is in paragraph 6. And I'm going to bracket this off and label it as the poem because that's what it is. So the best thing for you to do is find your rhyme scheme. This is a poem, so anytime we have a poem, we know we are dealing with rhyme scheme. So let's look at this first word, then. So then would get a letter A because it's the first word we're looking at. So then 10, so that has the same ending sound, so it also gets an A. And then we have town. Town doesn't rhyme with 10 or then, so it gets a B. And then we have down, which rhymes with town. So then and 10 rhyme. So I'm going to draw an arrow to that. And then we have town and down. So those rhyme. Okay. So that's what we are dealing with right now. So we have some examples of rhyme. We have some examples of alliteration. Oh, so I just realized we have one more example of alliteration before we move on. In paragraph 5, Jerome says poems are all about flowers and fluff. So both of those begin with the fluff sound at the beginning. So that would be another good example of alliteration. Um, so now we need to think about what effect these examples of alliteration create and the rhyme. So we already know that rhyme creates a musical quality and connects ideas. So we know alliteration also kind of helps with the rhythm of the poem. And it also helps ideas kind of flow smoothly together. So like for example, when Jerome says poems are all about fluff and flowers, we know that he doesn't take poems seriously, right? And it kind of helps that phrase fluff and flowers kind of flow together. So, now that we have found several examples of rhyme and alliteration, those are just a few. So, you may have some that I don't have, and that's okay. Let's go ahead and do our second close reading box. So, this one says to circle words and phrases that are repeated in the dialogue. What impact do they have on the characters? So, we already know, based on what we know about plays and just literature in general, that dialogue is when the characters speak to each other. So the characters are speaking to each other. So we know that we are looking for examples of repetition of words and phrases in the dialogue. And we have to figure out what impact do they have on the characters. So how does it affect them? So I want you to look back over this play one more time, but this time I want you to look for examples of word repetition, so phrases, words that are getting repeated over and over again within the dialogue, so where the characters are talking to each other. All right, so go ahead and do this. When you find your examples, I want you to circle them. After you've done that, you can come back and we'll talk about some examples of word repetition. All right, guys, so go ahead and get started and come back when you are finished. All right, so we are back. There are several examples of repeating words and phrases in this play to honor. So the first thing I noticed in paragraph number 2, they use this word honor. So they're talking about heroes, honoring heroes. So it says Mr. Claypool said that we had to find a unique way to honor a hero. So honor is mentioned a few times in this paragraph. It's used here and then it's used when it says people have been honoring heroes. So this whole phrase, honoring, honor heroes, is getting repeated over and over again in paragraph 2. It's repeated a couple times. In paragraph 4, they're talking about it again. They're talking about honoring a hero. So we know that they are trying to figure out ways that they can honor heroes, right? So let's see. In paragraph 6, when Alicia is reading this poem, um, from Barbara Frecci, there's this phrase, bravest of all. And that phrase, bravest of all, actually is repeated several more times throughout the poem. So it's repeated in paragraph 6, it's repeated again in paragraph 7, so bravest of all. And then it's repeated again 2 times in paragraph 9 when Jerome is talking about the poems about the soldiers and veterans. Let's see, where is it? Right here. Bravest of all. So that phrase is repeated several times. And then on top of that, they use that word brave or bravely several times too. So in paragraph 8, they have this word bravely. And then we have bravery, non, and then brave. And then in paragraph 10, they have that word bravery again. And if you also look in paragraph 8, when they are reading from the quote, the charge of the light brigade, it says, it goes cannons to the right of them, cannon to the left of them. So these cannons are getting mentioned multiple times. And then this, I want you to make sure that you know this is a quote from a poem. If you did not know that, it's a quote from a poem. So they're talking about all those cannons. So, just from looking at this, it looks like the biggest phrase that's getting repeated has to do with bravery. Specifically, that phrase, bravest of all, that's repeated 4 times total. So we know that when authors use word repetition, they're trying to do something that brings our attention to the word or phrase that they keep repeating. We know that when authors repeat something more than once, they're probably doing it because it's important for some reason. So, whenever we are thinking about the impact this has, we know that this phrase, bravest of all, is important for some reason. But our hint says that we have to think about the impact it has on the characters. So, we're going to have to think about how that phrase impacts the characters. Well, I know that phrase is first introduced by Alicia, right? So, I'm going to make myself a note. So, Alicia introduces it whenever she is reading the quote from the poem. So she introduces it, and then Jerome goes, bravest of all, that's neat. Do you know any others? So he's kind of thinking about it. He is repeating the phrase, he is thinking out loud. And we already know that Jerome kind of has a kind of almost like a negative outlook on poetry. In paragraph 5, he says, poetry, really? Poems are all about flowers and fluff. So he doesn't think poetry can be something about something serious, especially about war and bravery. So he's kind of getting a little bit impressed. So he's throwing around that idea of bravest of all. And then they start looking at other poems. And then Jerome's like, poems about soldiers, bravest of all. And he's saying, oh, we can look for other poems. And then Tia is talking about how she kind of builds her idea off of Jerome's and says they can make their presentation about poetry, poems about bravery. All right. So now that we've thought about how that is affected, um, we're going to go ahead and move on to our questions on the next page. However, we're going to do this in a separate video. That way we can break it down a little bit more without having a super long video. So if you have questions about this this play, To Honor, or anything that we talked about with sound devices, particularly repetition, alliteration, make sure you let me know. I'm always available to help out. All right, guys, as soon as you finish this video up, go on to the next, and you will continue there.